This is an explanation of my advanced mouse gliding code in VoiceAttack, with the code on the left and the variables on the right. I can say go or nothing, followed by up, down, left or right, followed by crawl, slow, fast, sprint, or nothing. This accommodates whether or not you feel you need to say go in front of it, or even if I later needed it in a game in which I'd also be saying up, down, left, right, followed by a number for cursor movements, or even grid-based movements with the cursor. As before, moving starts out as being 0 or undefined. I set it equal to 1, which might stop some of the loops before I actually get to them. Then this is your input, which I've coloured according to the 3 phases of doing things. Direction is set to be equal to the input, and then removes go followed by a spacebar but doesn't trim it. This leaves it to just being up, down, left, right, followed by crawl, slow, etc. I then set speed to be exactly equal to direction. Then going back to direction, I remove spacebar crawl, spacebar slow, spacebar fast, and spacebar sprint. If I didn't say a speed after up, down, left, right, then I'd be done, and it would just equal up, down, left, right. If I did, these 4 lines remove it, and I'm left with direction is equal to up, down, left, or right. And then I simply remove whatever is in direction from the string speed, and I trim it to remove any spaces. Note that at this point speed could be an empty string. As before, I set delay equal to 50, increment to 3, and it has the same possibilities as before, although I realise that in this code I've set the sprint increment to equal 21. Running through the possibilities, delay is equal to 125 or 50, increment is equal to 119, 21 or 3. Then I kill the commands mouse movement loop and mouse diagonal loop. I'll show mouse diagonal loop a bit later. Mouse movement loop is what actually does the movements. I set moving back to 0, and then execute the command mouse movement loop. In mouse movement loop, I set scalar to equal 1. I multiply increment by scalar. I set wait equal to the delay divided by 1000, so it's either 0.125 or 0.05, and then I begin the loops, which are dependent upon whatever the value of direction is. If direction is up, it moves up by the increment and then pauses by wait. If it's down, it moves down and waits, and so on for the others. In this way, I've got the horizontal and vertical directions in a single command. The clever part about this one is that the directions macro kills previous loops and then activates the movement loop, and the movement loop just moves the cursor up until it's killed. There's a small chance that during the period when moving is equal to 1 it will be stopped more naturally, but in either case the movement is strictly stopped before you start a new movement. This overcomes the shortcoming from the previous method. For the diagonal movement, there's a lot of commands that come in, and I've only got 3 different speeds. So up left, left up, right, right up, down left down right down, and I say slow, nothing, or fast. As before, moving starts out as 0 or undefined, it's set to 1. I set the input to whatever I said. I copy this into direction, and then copy that into speed. In direction, I remove spacebar slow and spacebar fast, which leaves it to strictly being whatever directions I said. I then remove whatever is in direction from speed, which restricts speed to being slow, nothing, or fast. I then create the variable ud, which is equal to direction. Now, as it goes through these things, it removes all spaces, which compresses everything together, and then removes all instances of right, and then all instances of left. Once it's done this, all you'll have left is up or down. Then I create the variable lr. I set it equal to direction, I do the trim thing as before, and then I remove whatever is in the variable ud, so this deletes all spaces, ups and downs from the string lr, leaving it as just being left or right. There is a redundant line there about removing go from direction from an earlier draft of this. I do the same things before with delay and increment, although in this case, because I've only got slow and fast as the alternate speeds, it means it will only be 1, 3 or 9, and the delay never changes. I kill the mouse diagonal loop and the mouse movement loop, set moving back equal to 0, and then launch the command mouse diagonal loop. In mouse diagonal loop, scalar is set equal to 1, it does the same thing with increment as before, I do the same thing with wait as before, though in this case you might think I could have set wait to equal 0.05 as a constant. I found it helps to have these things structured the same way, so if I wanted to implement additional speeds later, I'd still have the same structure available. And then it follows these loops which examine the values of ud and lr. For example, if ud equals up and lr equals left, it moves left by increment pixels and up by increment pixels, and then pauses for wait. If ud is up and lr equals right, it moves right increment pixels and up increment pixels, and so on. It's tricky to set up, but once done, it just runs smoothly. As an overall summary, the directions macro figures out the direction, the increment and the wait, kills previous movement loops and diagonal movement loops, then activates the movement loop. The diagonal directions macro figures out the directions UD and LR, the increment and the weight, kills previous movement loops and diagonal movement loops, then activates the diagonal movement loop. The movement loop moves the cursor horizontally or vertically until moving is equal to 1, or it's killed, and the diagonal movement loop moves the cursor diagonally until moving equals 1, or it is killed. Put together, it's completely reliable. Even my implementation in VoiceBot had an issue that sometimes the F8 trigger to terminate previous loops didn't work, and occasionally I had 2 loops running at once. Suppose you even made a silly command that triggered several movement loops and diagonal movement loops at once. You'd just have to say one of these direction macros or diagonal direction macros, and the kill command doesn't work on just one, it works on every single command of that instance. The only limitation in this implementation is that the direction commands each reference the mouse movement commands, and that means if you want to copy them to another profile, VoiceAttack throws up an error. So while you can copy over the 2 loops, the only thing you can do is remove the kill commands from both of the direction commands, copy those over, and then paste the kill commands back in at the right place.